We've arrived. College football playoff time right here at the Voice of College Football. We are just about 24 hours away from kickoff in South Bend. Can't wait for 4 games over the weekend. The triple header, of course, on Saturday. Welcome into the Voice of College Football, the college football show. Best destination for discussion, debate, and analysis. We will take your calls. We will be here for I have no idea how long, but we're going to talk about all the college football playoff games. We are also going to look at the latest in the transfer portal and many interesting moves that have been made each and every day during this transfer portal time. And there will be a dead period coming up December 23rd through January 1st. Well, let's run down all the matchups. Let's run down the games, give you my analysis, my take. We just recorded with Steve Merrill from Wager Talk. You can check out that segment and Steve's selections over on patreon.com/MarkRogersTV or as a premium member right here. Let's get to our first call of the night. We got the real MVP on the line.
Hey, Mark, how you doing this evening?
I am doing just splendid. How are you?
I'm doing good. So, Mark, my first question is going to be, if you had to rank these games in terms of most likely upset and least likely upset, how would you rank them?
Most likely upset. SMU Penn State 1. Sorry. I don't even consider Tennessee and Ohio State an upset, but according to Vegas, yes, that would be an upset. Number 1, Tennessee, Ohio State. Number 2, SMU Penn State. Number 3, Indiana, Notre Dame. Number 4, Clemson over Texas.
Okay, and I've seen a lot of meteorological talk in this game, a lot of weather talk. How much do you think the weather is going to play a factor in the game versus Penn State being a better football team versus SMU as an example?
Well, I would hope that there are no excuses going to be flying here and to and fro at the end of the weekend. I would hope not. Just had a conversation with a friend of mine this afternoon who made mention of not liking the cold weather in Columbus for Ohio State's purposes, much like the Michigan game. That cannot be an excuse. Does it affect some football teams more than others? Well, obviously. So that can be a discussion. It can't be an excuse. It can't be, well, the weather caused us to lose. If we had a fast track, if we had ideal weather, football shouldn't be played in that kind of cold or slippery conditions. That's part of the game. That's part of the game. And you should have a tougher team mentally and physically to deal with it. However, it does affect, of course, the passing game comes into play. And you're an NFL guy. I would say that NFL history has shown us not sheer cold has affected passing the football, unless it gets into just ridiculous circumstances of 10 and 15 below zero. But actually, there have been some of the more prolific passing games in the history of the NFL and NFL playoff games in cold weather. As long as the field's dry, the wind is under control, and the receivers obviously have the advantage of knowing where they're going, and the defensive backs do not. But I do think that there is an advantage for those people that are acclimated to cold weather as opposed to those people that are not. I just think that there's a big overemphasis, huge overemphasis by certain people that don't live in the northern part of the country about when it gets cold and how cold it gets. These guys playing college football, for anyone, they are not used to playing in cold weather during their college football season. They're not NFL players. So I think it's overrated. I do think it's a discussion point. I do think it's valid. It can be discussed. We don't know what that conclusion is. We can only conjecture. I think it has a minimal impact.
I completely agree with you. The wind, in my opinion, has more of an impact depending on if you're a throwing team or a running team. But Ohio State complaining about the wind in the Michigan game was, in my opinion, soft and pathetic because the wind wasn't like 40, 50 miles an hour. It was only just a light breeze.
Did they complain about it, or did they say they didn't pass as much because of the wind?
They didn't pass as much.
Those are two different things.
Wind, which is an excuse. That's a complete excuse for bad play calling. You're just looking for a reason. They say, well, there was some wind out there, which it's true, there was some wind, but it wasn't hurricane force level winds out there. I mean, you got elite receivers and elite quarterback. You should have at least Ohio State, but.
So Ohio State threw the ball about 30 times. I've not looked at the stats recently, something like that. We don't have any examples of them throwing those 30 passes and the wind affecting those passes that I'm aware of.
That's correct. But they said Chip Kelly didn't call more pass plays because of the wind.
I'm aware of that. I don't really buy that, to your point, but I was just differentiating between making in this case. I think that they were covering themselves, or attempting to. It was a poor attempt at why they called a bad game versus making an excuse for losing.
Correct. Mark, how does Indiana beat Notre Dame? Because to me, the majority of the lion's share of doubt of Indiana is on the Ohio State game. And for me, it should be on the Michigan game, because Michigan's not a good football team at all. But if they had a quarterback that could throw the football maybe 5 yards down the line of field, they would have won that game, in my opinion. So how do they win the game when they're facing an elite team like Notre Dame? Or elite compared to Indiana standards, I should say.
What I think they need to do defensively is stop the run, and that's easier said than done, because I don't know that Notre Dame doesn't have the best backfield in America with Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love. They're exceptional. But Indiana does have a top 5 rush defense, and that's going to be just one of those something's got to give deals, which is pretty prevalent during playoff games. You have highly ranked offensive and defensive units taking on highly ranked offensive and defensive units generally, and so something's got to give. But if Notre Dame is forced to pass, then that's where they can get into trouble, because Riley Leonard can have off games. He's not a great thrower of the football. Notre Dame does not have elite receiver talent. And if Indiana forces them to try to connect downfield, then it could be a long day for the Notre Dame offense. And then Indiana certainly can make plays in the passing game. Curtis Rourke is a guy who protects the football and is the number 1 efficiency passer in America. Indiana is number 1 in pass efficiency this year. So, Vegas has given us at least 3 of the games, with Texas being the outlier where their point spread has risen throughout the week up to 12, where the underdog is not some massive underdog. Vegas is telling us that even though Indiana is doubted because of their brand, even though they're doubted because they only faced one elite team and they lost by 23 points, and they're Indiana and they're playing on the road, that they're a touchdown underdog. This is not a sizable margin. So Vegas is giving us their indication of the difference between these two teams, and it's not significant.
Right. I believe, at least in my opinion, it says a lot more about Notre Dame than Indiana, because I do not believe in Indiana at all. The Clemson Texas game, the line went down and now it's shooting back up. Is a player in the transfer portal for Clemson that's important? Is it people just don't believe Clemson can score like 14 points, so if Texas wins 28-14, it's a cover? Why is the line as massive it is and still going up?
Yeah, I am not impressed with Clemson. I think that they've got of course, a national championship coach who knows how to navigate these postseason situations. His record in these spots is exceptional. And are they a good team? Do they have talent? Yes, of course they do, but their performances this year are not impressive. They played their best game against SMU to a certain extent. That was the best team they beat by far. They beat no other team that's anywhere close to SMU, and they had to hang on for dear life and were completely outplayed in the fourth quarter. Blew a 17-point lead. And every other game that they've played against the likes of Virginia and Pitt and others, to me, is not impressive. I was going through their defense before we came on tonight, and the names impress me. Their individual stats impress me. Their high-end players like Barrett Carter, Sammy Brown's an exceptional athletic linebacker. TJ Parker, Wade Woodess, those guys are all conference, near all America type players. But when you put it all together, their defense has not been really good this year. And you would think that, okay, the defense carried them because the offense has not been very good either. They're a pretty marginal team. I know that's bringing it down just a bit. They're not marginal against the entire nation, but they're really not an outstanding football team. Texas is having trouble scoring themselves, though. They've had trouble against your Kentucky team. I think they scored 31, and they had a scoop and score in that game. They only scored 15 and 19 in the two Georgia games. All these recent games, Texas A&M was a 17-point effort. So with all that elite wide receiver talent, and Sark calling the plays as a mastermind on offense, Texas is not scoring much.
You're right, but I think this is the game I'm most confident in the result, and I'm pretty confident in all four of them. If Texas scores 17 points, I don't see how they lose this game. It's going to take a lot for Clemson to be competitive. And speaking of that, you know how ESPN, Mark, they're just going down the clickbait route. I'm not sure if you saw this, but they were given their picks to win the national championship. Sam Acho has Clemson winning it all this year.
Yeah, there's just no discernible reason as to why somebody would make that prediction. They have shown us nothing that would give us any indication that team could win 4 games against anyone.
Agree. I
can't explain that one.
I wish I could, Mark, but I can't either. The final game I'll ask you about is the Ohio State-Tennessee game. How much orange do you think we're going to see compared to red?
So there's this controversy concerning an Ohio State ticket code. I know nothing about it, but that it was leaked, and therefore Tennessee is going to flood Ohio Stadium. I don't know. I have to think that the Tennessee fan base is much more excited about this game than the Ohio State fan base. The Ohio State fan base is generally going to take this as, if they lose, obviously it's the end of the world. If they win, it just kind of is a check mark, and we got past that one. Now let's move on to the next one. We're really not going to give Ryan Day much credit for winning this game because we should win this game. We're supposed to win this game. Move on to the next one, where this means the world to Tennessee. I think the pressure should be even. We have 2 elite programs. We have a first-time 12-team playoff, but it just doesn't seem like it's going to be. It's going to seem like Ohio State feels like they have to win, and winning is just going to be relief, where Tennessee's going to lay it on the line and play hard, let the chips fall where they may, play their best game, and believe that they can win.
Right. I somewhat disagree with the characterization that Ohio State and Tennessee on programs are the same level of tier. Ohio State.
No, they're not.
Yeah, Ohio State should win this football game, but I think it'd be an ugly look for Ohio State if it's like 40 or 50% orange and 50% red. I mean, it really questions in how much buy-in is there behind Ryan Day and how much the football fans have just completely checked out.
You're probably a little young for this analogy or this correlation to that. But if you're a baseball fan, the Atlanta Braves won constantly in the 1990s. They were by far the most successful regular season team in the 1990s. And they just kept going to the National League Championship Series, World Series, and losing after having dominant seasons. And at some point, in that run, and they packed the place, and Atlanta was full throttle Braves. And at the start of that dynasty, they were in love with that team, but they got bored and they started having all sorts of issues selling out playoff games, World Series games, because those people were just bored and they just were like, you need to deliver the full deal for us.
Similar to the Buffalo teams that went to 4 straight Super Bowls and never won any of them.
I don't know that those fans got apathetic about it, though.
Fair. Do you think it's just because of the expansion of the playoffs is the feeling this way? Do you think it's a lack of belief in Ryan Day or a lack of belief in the Ohio State program at large?
All of the above. I think that they're used to winning all the time. They expect to be in a 14 playoff, let alone a 12-team playoff. That was a foregone conclusion to any Ohio State person that we're going to be in a 12-team playoff. So that's not accomplishing anything. I don't agree with that. I think you still have to go out and play well for most of the season, and it should be deemed a accomplishment. But I don't think your typical Ohio State fan considers getting to a 12-team playoff an accomplishment. They just assumed that they were going to be there. So now is when the payoff starts. And yes, no confidence in Ryan Day, just lost to Michigan. This game, even though it's a playoff game and technically more important, is not going to make up for losing to Michigan. And again, they're going to have to deliver more, whether those expectations are fair or that criteria against what all these other games are this weekend. Like if Notre Dame loses to Indiana, they shouldn't lose that game. They'll be at home. Notre Dame, Indiana. Look at the comparison. It's a bigger gap than Ohio State and Tennessee, of course. Notre Dame fans are going to be disgruntled, but they're not going to be calling for Marcus Freeman's head. And they're not going to say, basically, we should be jumping off the bridge, the nearest bridge. So in no other game does this situation occur. Penn State, James Franklin doesn't seem quite as intense, but of course, considering their opponent as well, they should seriously question what's going on there if they lose this game. So they're pretty much in the same spot of it's more than an expectation. It's a given that they should win Saturday. They're not going to be given much credit for winning.
Right. And it was silly to me that Notre Dame gave Marcus Freeman an extension before the playoff game. But I think that's also would be a factor of why Notre Dame fans wouldn't be as upset. Because I think they are sick and tired of the narrative they can't win the big game. And it's been 30 years since they've won a big game, so it's justifiable. But Ryan Day doesn't have that privilege of the contract extension and the confidence. I know the administrator said he will definitely be back for next season, but I don't know how much of that's. I think most people are viewing that as just lip service.
Well, I don't know what led to Ross Bjork making that statement as the athletic director, whether he was asked and felt as though he needed to make a statement of confidence, or if he took the initiative to make that statement. Those would be two different things. Maybe he is back for sure next year.
Well, maybe, but it would be really dumb to do it, say it out in public and 100% be behind him before the playoff game, in my opinion. Because if you lose this game, you're Ohio State, and you've lost 3 games in a season, and including losing to Michigan, and including losing to Oregon. Your record against top 5 teams is for Ryan Day is 3-7. It's just this whole perception around him is toxic. He's just radioactive, man.
Well, first of all, it's extremely difficult to have a better than 3-7 record against top 5 teams. Most coaches do.
Right. Well, you're Ohio State, though. If you want to be put in the top tier, you've got to have top tier expectation. You can't have your cake. Of course.
I wonder what Nick Saban's record is against top 5 teams. It's better than 3-7, sure. But anyway, I don't think people understand the math behind that. They just hear 3-7, and they don't understand that if you're a top 5 team all the time, so you're always in those circumstances playing a top 5 team, of course. You may not always be a top 5 team when you're playing a top 5 team, and the best you can be is just another top 5 team. So anyway, mathematically, it's extremely difficult to have a winning record against top 5 teams. I lost my point, but okay, back to your premise that you don't give a vote of confidence before the playoff. You don't believe that a administration can have confidence in a coach regardless of the result of one game?
I think with the accumulation of everything else, I don't believe it should be warranted in this circumstance. I think if he won the Michigan game, since it's the most important rivalry in all of sports, then you can go ahead and say, hey, we're 11-1. We believe in him, even if he loses. But losing that game, especially to that team this year, the timing of it was just horrible because most Ohio State fans, I believe, want Ryan Day fired. And if they lose this game, especially with it being 40% Orange Tennessee fans, it just feels the vibe of it is just completely off and horrible.
Well, I don't disagree with you. I disagree with the premise that you have to that you can't have confidence in your coach prior to a playoff situation to basically make the statement, if anyone reads between the lines, this is our coach. We have full confidence in him. We've seen enough to know that regardless of the outcome this weekend, that we still have confidence in what we are doing.
I mean, that's fair and that's valid and that's fine, but it just felt like this was supposed to be the year. This team, everybody was all in. They spent reportedly $20 million on this roster. And for this elite talent to go have 3 losses is just unimaginable to me. I mean, on paper, they're, if not the best team, no, at worst, the second best team in all of college football. So
you're right.
So when you go all in and everybody's all in and we got this level of talent, this level of players, this level of coaching staff, you go out there and get Chip Kelly, a good OC, I believe, but had a horrible game against Michigan. It's just one of them weird circumstances where if you lose, losing 3 games to most programs would be fine, but to Ohio State and this year, I just don't believe it. Like if Michigan last year, they lost 3 games, I think they would have viewed it as a complete failure because they were all in that year. Everybody came back to win the national championship. They obviously won the national championship, but you all decided you all couldn't have Michigan having the last national championship and not even to get out of the first round. That's tough, man. That's just tough.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with a judgment made on Ryan Day. That's not what I'm arguing. I'm arguing that you can have a level of confidence in a coach to be able to make that statement before a playoff game.
Okay, that's fine. If they have that level of confidence, that's fine. I just don't have that level of confidence.
I don't either. I don't have any issue if they lose this game firing Ryan Day. I have no issue with that. I'm also not going to be, and this isn't good for views, but I'm not going to be flabbergasted and raising hell if Ryan Day doesn't get fired if they lose this game.
I mean, that's fair and valid, but man, if they lose this game and they don't fire him, 2025 feels like that has to be the final year.
Sure.
Like it feels like if they don't do anything, if they're just in this exact same spot, it has to end. This can't continue for you all because it would have been a decade since you won your last national championship. Be 0-5 versus Michigan. Oh, it would just be a complete disaster, Mark. But anyway, thanks for talking to me. It's good talking to you as always.
Absolutely, Derail. We'll see you. So let's also understand that a lot of the people, namely coaches, that we revere in this sport, if they were held to the same standard, they would have never accomplished what they accomplished. And certainly most recently, Jim Harbaugh was 0-5 against Ohio State, and he wasn't losing those games close. One of them. So, yeah. You also have to replace the guy. You got to replace the guy. But I am not necessarily going to initiate the Ryan Day conversation here until Ohio State loses. Then we will be talking Ryan Day ad nauseum, I'm sure, at whatever point that comes, whether that's Saturday night or that's New Year's Day or that's the next weekend or it's the national championship game. So to focus on these games, and the link is in the chat if you would like to give me a call to talk the weekend's matchups. If you're watching us on Twitter and are not aware of what we do, we are the voice of college football. Appreciate you being here. Some have deemed me the voice of college football. That's another matter to be taken up in the offseason every so often. So the voice of college football here. We would love for you to join us on YouTube, where you can take part in the chat and you can give me a call. We've left the call-in line both in the chat, and then also the call-in line is on X as well. And we use the terms X and Twitter interchangeably. One day I will stop that. Running through some notes that I picked up on this Indiana-Notre Dame matchup. So, of course, that's the lone game on Friday. We'll be back before and after Notre Dame-Indiana on Friday. So we will take your comments, your questions, your calls prior to the game, and then we will circle on back after the game to discuss what happened, what we just saw. So post-game, Indiana-Notre Dame after the pregame show as well. Then on Saturday, we'll wrap it all up with a big call-in show after the 3 games. Notre Dame pressures the quarterback at an extremely high rate. Based on what I saw of Indiana's offensive line and pass protection against Ohio State and Michigan, that is not a great indicator for success in the passing game for Indiana. Albeit, if we saw this last Notre Dame game against USC with a mobile quarterback, and Curtis Rourke is mobile, not to the degree that Jaden Mayava is at USC, that I think that that's the biggest issue. And that typically is the biggest issue for any team that's trying to make its way through a long line of playoff caliber teams, and that's offensive line. You don't want issues along the offensive line, but most teams, that's where they struggle. And one of the reasons why I think is it's one of the most difficult things to do in all of football is keep big, fast guys. When you are limited in your ability, you cannot grab them, you cannot hold them, you have to stay in front of them. It's a difficult thing to do. And so most offensive line struggles. Tennessee has not had the best offensive line play the latter half of this season. Ohio State's offensive line play, albeit missing their 2 best players up front, not great. Indiana has struggled against the 2 best opponents up front. All right. I believe we've got George on the line. It's out there somewhere in the fog, in the mist. George.
Hey, Mark.
How are you?
Very happy. We just got Dallas Wilson.
Dallas Wilson.
Something like that. He's the 3rd best, 2nd best receiver in the draft. I call it the draft recruiting.
Well, it's not a draft.
I know. It's kind of a draft.
No, it's not kind of a draft. Free agency, maybe. You can call it that.
Okay, it's straight up free agency. I agree. That's a better word.
Yes. I'll look up your guy here.
Hey, listen, it's amazing. Mark, it's amazing. He committed to Oregon 2 weeks ago, and he asked out of his letter of intent now. He's going to Florida. And that's some funny
players.
Hey, drop it. Breaking news.
Breaking news.
Who's the 2nd string quarterback that just went into the portal that opted out of the playoffs? Oh my God. I told everybody this is going to happen. people will opt out of the playoffs. You get it? This is, who is it? Penn State. Penn State.
Yes.
Their backup quarterback said, "Coach, I love you, but I got a 6-week window here, you know." What, Mark? You better call the NCAA and offer them a settlement and tell them you'll save them or something, because this is not working out at all. The backup quarterback.
Yeah. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. And I can't imagine that nobody thought of this. Nobody thought of what we would be headed toward, and that's playoff players opting out.
Listen, the best one I've heard so far is that Dallas is coming to Florida. He's the number 2 receiver in the we're not going to call it a draft, in free agency from high school. And oh my God, I'm so happy. Thank you, Dallas. He committed to them, and now he just raised our recruiting class 2 points by 1 commitment, you know, because he's a 5-star receiver, you know.
I'm just trying to get it straight. Are you talking about the transfer portal, or are you talking about recruiting? You talking about the recruiting class for this year?
Yes, it's hard to believe, but it's the transfer portal. He committed to Oregon, and then he filed to get out of his affidavit of financial commitment or something. Some legal shit going on here. He wants to go to Florida instead.
Good news for you,
Dallas.
George. Good stuff.
His name's Dallas. His name's Dallas Wilson. He's the greatest receiver in the history of college football.
Yeah.
You should see this kid. He's like Jeremiah at Ohio State.
Except he hasn't played college football yet.
Well, whatever. He's he will start day 1, first play. He's a starter in college. He's a grown man. He's probably 34 years old. They probably faked his birth certificate or something. Hey, don't repeat that.
You said it all, George. You said it all.
I just put it out there. Who knows? I've never seen anybody else's.
What's that?
Hey, what was your final prediction on the Gators versus Tulane?
Oh, I have not made a prediction yet. They're playing tomorrow night, right?
I think it's a 14-point spread. That's insane. That's insane.
It is up there. Yep.
But it's not insane if you know DJ Lagway and LJ McCray. I give the 14 points. I'm going for it.
That had something to do with it.
Pardon me?
Tulane lost his quarterback. He went into the
I can't believe you just said that. Now throw that in on top of it. You see, there's a problem here, right? 14 points, that's like free money. How could it be less than 28, you know? But you know what? Tulane is a good team all year long. They still have a lot of other players, but they just don't have a quarterback, you know? And what if the backup quarterback turns out to be pretty good? And what if Florida has a bad day?
It's happened before.
That's why I just play roulette. I don't need this shit. It's too complicated, college football.
I hear you, George.
I like a static number of numbers. Nothing ever moves, you know? And then the spinning ball. But in college football, it's like, he just transferred to who? I'm like, I can't keep up with it. Oh no, he plays for Alabama now. The best player on your team.
Well,
Pardon
George,
me?
do you have anything else for us?
Not really, unless you want to get into commercial law. But I just want
I
to
think
say,
we're gonna
go
pass on that
Gators!
tonight.
Go Gators! We play tomorrow at 9:30 or 12:30 a.m. or 12:30 on the Pacific Coast, 3:30 on the Eastern Coast.
Okay. We're looking forward to it.
A bowl game, Florida versus Tulane.
I'll be watching.
Tulane is located in New Orleans. It's one of those city universities. You follow me? There is no
I
campus.
was
It's
aware
just
of
like,
that.
right. I have relatives that lived around there for years. You should hear the stories. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Well, sure. I've got an idea of where you're headed.
All right,
I'm just saying.
I'm just saying it's a scary place.
Absolutely.
Nobody walks
We
around on the
appreciate you.
streets.
Yes.
Nobody's going to the park around there.
No.
It's off limits. Yeah.
All right, George. Enjoy the game.
All right. Love you guys more.
All right. We were drifting away from college football there. So let's pick it up. We have left the link there in the chat. We appreciate your conversation. And of course, any comments or questions you have that you would like to get on the show as well, leave those in the chat. We will get to those. We appreciate the super chat contribution. All right. Ripping through my notes on Indiana and Notre Dame. We were talking about Notre Dame's pass rush. Puts pressure on the quarterback about as much as anybody in the country. And Indiana pass protection issues against the likes of Ohio State and against Michigan. Although Indiana's an extremely experienced offensive line with something like 150 career starts along the offensive line. All right, we got a call coming in. We got SEC football on the line. What's going on?
Hey, Mark, can you hear me?
We got you. How you doing?
Good. Are you ready for the game Saturday?
Ready for the games. Yes, ready for the games. We got one on Friday night, too.
So, what is your thoughts on Tennessee and Ohio State?
Oh, guess I've been spewing my thoughts for the last 2 weeks or so, but my thoughts are that Ohio State's a better football team, but Tennessee could easily win this game, and that Tennessee's best attribute as a football team, outside of probably Dylan Sampson, is a defensive front that's strong, and that's not good for Ohio State because that's their biggest issue, has been run blocking more than anything. The last 2 games against Indiana and at Michigan, they did not run block well, and of course have been injured up front. So Ohio State needs to start fast, or they're going to have the crowd turn on them. They're going to start to white knuckle this. I think it's going to be a highly competitive game. And probably the later it gets in the game, if it's close, may tend to favor Tennessee.
I agree. I think the uglier the game is, the more it favors Tennessee, but it's either going to go 2 ways. Ohio State's either going to blow Tennessee out, or Tennessee's going to barely pull it off.
So
I don't think Tennessee has the ability to blow out Ohio State, if you agree with me with that.
Okay. Yeah, I understand that line of thinking. I don't see it quite that clear, but I do understand that line of thinking. The line of thinking is that Ohio State's better than Tennessee. Therefore, they've got the ability, if they're on their game and get off to a good start and feel good about themselves, to blow out Tennessee. But just as I pointed out, that if the game gets deep into the fourth quarter and it's a close game, that there's more pressure on Ohio State. Therefore, they're more likely to blow the game and Tennessee win a close game. I totally get that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily buy into that, but I get the point.
Yes. I guess what I'm concerned about is Tennessee secondary. I think their defensive line makes their secondary better than it really is because they put so much pressure on the offensive line. Do you agree with me on that?
Well, sure. That works hand in hand for everyone. A great defensive front makes your defensive backs look better. I don't have a ton of confidence in Tennessee's secondary. It's fairly mediocre.
Yeah.
So I think Ohio State should throw the ball downfield. I think they should be looking for one-on-one matchups, and they should let her fly, not be completely unbalanced. They don't need to throw 70 passes, but 40 pass attempts would not be a bad thing for Ohio State.
Yeah, I agree, Mark. That's all I have for you.
Well, I appreciate you calling.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Absolutely. Enjoy the ball games. Yeah, all these point spreads outside of the Clemson-Texas game, which is extended out to 12 points, are roughly in that touchdown to 8-point margin. But wow, I think that is Vegas giving Ohio State a lot of respect. I think that Vegas really believes Ohio State is still one of the very best teams in college football. I think that's borne out by the projected point spreads that we see in these various matchups. So Vegas still, it's difficult to move Vegas off of a team. It's difficult. They have to experience and run the numbers a number of times with a good team or a bad team where they have to have their opinion of that team change. It takes some time. And so that Michigan game is not going to tamper much with Vegas's read on Ohio State, which, according to what I've heard, the majority of bets are coming in taking Tennessee and the line, but the majority of money, which usually refers to the people in the know that put the heavy money down, is heavier on the Ohio State side. Speaking of which, we got Dr. Buckeye checking in. Mr. David Greenshield, how are you?
Yes. How you doing, Mark? Wanted to get together. Excellent. Wanted to get together and talk a little playoff talk, all playoff games with you. I did want to, because I didn't get a chance to ask you or see what your opinion was on a couple of the coaching hires. Let me just start off real quick. What was your opinion on the Belichick situation with North Carolina?
I think that Bill Belichick could do an exceptional job down there. I think some of the criticisms I've heard of him not knowing what he's getting into have to be short-sighted. He knows exactly what's going on in college football and how much is required. I would say that if we were under the structure of college football 5 years ago, that he might be looking at this as a way to stay active, stay involved, be a coach, take advantage of all the fun things with running a program and working with the players and coaching and scheming, but not have to deal with all the nonsense. But he has to be cognizant of what's going on with all the nonsense. So he wants to legitimately run a football program for a period of time.
Well, let me go here. Do you think he's got this job right now because he couldn't find the right NFL job? Because that's something that's been bantied about. I don't know if you've heard that or what your thoughts are on that, because it was my view that I thought he might look into either the Chicago job. Obviously, I thought the New York Giants job could be appealing to him. Obviously, I've been there. It's where he started, DC under Parcells, all of that. I think Brian Daboll is not long for the job there with the Giants, probably going to be out. So I think there's probably a chance that he didn't get a pro job, or at least a pro job that would give him the kind of control that he wanted. I don't know what your thoughts are on that. That's why he went the college route, maybe.
I think that anyone who is used to working with NFL teams and NFL players and within the NFL system would be crazy to go back to college football. So I tend to agree that he either did not have any options or did not have the options that he felt confident in at the NFL level. Because why you would want to come back to college football, I would much rather coach
Yeah.
an NFL organization by far for so many reasons.
Yeah. I think that a lot of people obviously. Right. Well, you've heard Saban talk about it. You've heard even Urban talk about it, the college game as it is now. You know what I mean? And I've talked to, some people that are, smaller college coaches, even some high school coaches that have said that with the way that college football is situated right now, they just think bottom line, and maybe we've already seen this, it's going to drive more coaches away from the sport than to the sport. I don't know if that's always been your view as the sports change, but I think that there is a general feeling out there, especially hearing it from a lot of the top of the top guys there. That's why I mentioned their names.
What is the position that Jeff Hafley got at the NFL level?
I don't know if you feel the same way on that, Mark.
I think we've got a bit of a lag. What position?
He's a DC right now, but I don't. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're lagging a little bit back and forth. So excuse me if I talk over you.
Mark, I believe he's a DC.
Yeah. So
no, go ahead.
Yeah, I just think that's one indicator right there. Chip Kelly's another indicator that the mess that is college football is just, these guys still make a lot of money. They're still the king of the state. There are still a lot of positives to being a head coach in college football. And these guys still are basically, I'll put it a not so nice way, like egomaniacs. They believe they control everything and they want that power. So it's still obviously a lucrative position and it's still a well-desired position. But compared to what it was years ago with all the mess that they have to deal with, I always thought, even before NIL and the transfer portal, that it was much more desirable, at least the way I look at it, to be an NFL coach than a college football coach by far. Why you would want to keep track of 105 18 to 20-year-olds, and have to be responsible for keeping track of them, keeping them in class, et cetera, versus if there's a disciplinary issue in the NFL takes care of it. And yes, the whole budgeting process of NIL and dealing with all that and just getting on hands and knees in front of 17-year-olds, begging them to come to your school. No, thank you.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, Mark. By the way, are you hearing me a little bit better now? I know that we had a little bit of a lag there, so pardon me.
Yeah.
I did want to say that I do think that, I think you can have some success there. I just want to say this. I think there's a good recruiting base in North Carolina. I think that, I don't know what the collective situation is currently in the North Carolina situation, but there's some talent definitely in the state. And let's be honest, Mac Brown won some games there, Mark. And I think the conference is still a doable conference that he can compete in, with it being the ACC and not being in the Big Ten or the SEC. So I think there are some net positives. I think he can build a good coaching staff. And I don't know what your general thoughts are on it.
If the University of North Carolina doesn't have itself well positioned in NIL, it's because they don't care about football. They have plenty of resources. They're in a lucrative portion of the country, a ever expanding, exploding portion of the country. They have a huge academic endowment. It's just a university that is, as we get into the realignment portion of this, we've seen in recent years, it's probably the most coveted university out there, combined with the athletic department. So if they don't have NIL built up for football, then number one, I would be surprised that he would walk into that situation without having that proven to him in an interview. And number two, I would be shocked just otherwise that they were not able to parlay their many resources into NIL.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see what kind of staff he builds too, Mark. I mean, obviously that's the other major component. That's going to be a big thing going forward. But I think I'm not going to say he's going to be dominant, but I think he, is in a footprint where he can get some talent. I think that if their collectives are in order, I'm confident he can build, at least a fairly competent staff. And as I mentioned, it's a conference he can compete in. As I mentioned, even Mac Brown won some games there. So. I think over the next 2 or 3 years, I would not be surprised to see them be in a 12-team playoff. So
I agree. The guy's a mastermind at football and building organizations and choosing the right people to work with. Yes, as long as he has some fire in his belly, I think, again, this university, if they put their resources and attention and focus to football, they could be the Clemson in the 2020s, 2030s of 10 or 15 years ago.
right, that's true. Yeah, I want to get to the playoff games if I can. Oh, one quick thought on one of the coach, Mark. I want to mention. Any thoughts on Rich Rod going back to West Virginia? By the way, I just wonder how much coaches that go back the second time, it works out better than the first time.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't. I named about 7 or 8 examples, and none of them did as well the second time as the first time. It's not like that they did poorly, but
Right.
Bill Walsh, John Robinson, Bill Snyder, Mac Brown, Johnny Majors. Who else did I come up with? There were 2 or 3 more. None of those guys did as well the second
Bill
time around.
Snyder wasn't as. Did you say Snyder? I'm sorry. Did you say Bill Snyder?
Yes.
Okay, my bad. Yeah.
Yeah. None of them did as well.
Right. Right.
And he won't do as well.
Well, he had the four. I mean, the Big East, was the Big East at the time.
Yeah.
And he caught that period of time. I thought had those great Slayton and White teams that were really entertaining there for a period. And I think his offense was a little bit ahead of the game, at least at that particular period of time. And especially in comparison to the competition that he was going up against. Now he won some big bowl games there. You know what I mean? So. But yeah, I have my doubts there.
I think he'll do fine. He came off of the Arizona job, which he pretty much did at Arizona, an acceptable job, not a great job, not even a good job, but an acceptable job. They were okay when he was there, but he did a great job at Jacksonville State, lifting them into the FBS, being competitive. So he certainly has a formidable track record, and he's saying all the right things. I saw him during the football game, the West Virginia Bowl game,
right?
And he dropped the term national championship.
Hey, you got to throw it out there, I guess. You know what I mean? So, I mean, we'll see. I mean, I really have my doubts, but maybe it's a conference he can compete in. And, I always thought it was going to be 50-50 on whether West Virginia was going to fire their coach. But, I mean, even if they got to a bowl game, I mean, the guy was still – but, yeah, I have my doubts. I did want to get to the playoff games if I can, Mark. By the way, are you just kind of looking at all four of them, by the way? I have a really feeling that the road teams got legitimate chances in at least three of these four, if not all four. I don't know what your thoughts are early.
So I'm guessing that the one game you're not giving much of a chance to is Clemson at Texas.
Yeah, and I'm kind of borderline on that. I want to get to that in a minute, but I first wanted to get to Notre Dame and Indiana and get your thoughts on that. Um, I'm of a view, and I've been maybe a little bit higher on Notre Dame lately than most folks because I think that the last few weeks they've been playing some really good football. I do think their defense is pretty solid. I like their defensive line. They can run the football. My only doubt about Notre Dame, is what it's been in the past. Can that passing game come up big, in the playoff? And can they? Because I will say this. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mark. Indiana's got a pretty solid run defense, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, absolutely, they do.
So my question is, if they can limit Notre Dame's running game, can Riley Leonard and those skill guys produce enough in the passing game that they're going to need to win this game? I don't know if your early feel on whether that's going to be a low scoring game or it's going to be a game where we see some points, but I don't know what your vibe is on that.
So here is what I'm looking at. I'm looking at Notre Dame's defense gives me a ton of confidence. I think that they have an excellent defense on all three levels. They're strong. USC
Right.
did carve them up fairly well, though, in that last game at the Coliseum.
That's true.
Curtis Rourke is no Jaden Mayava as a runner or a guy that's going to be elusive in the pocket, although he's mobile. He's mobile, definitely. But Curtis Rourke is the number one efficiency passer in America. 31 touchdowns, 5 picks. Here's a matchup for you. Curtis Rourke is the number one efficiency passer in America, and Notre Dame is the number one pass efficiency defense. I don't know if Indiana can provide enough balance, number one, offensively, because I don't expect that they can run the ball against Notre Dame. I do not expect
No.
Indiana can run the ball. So that makes them one-dimensional. And then what Ohio State's defensive front did to Indiana's offensive line. And Michigan, after a couple big pass plays, giving up 14 points early, the same
Right.
outcome. That's where I think Indiana is going to be in a whole heck of a lot of trouble trying to score and move the ball consistently against Notre Dame. And I don't think that they have it in them to produce, like when Ohio State, for example, has issues being consistent on offense. They have Travion Henderson, boom, 60 yards. Jeremiah Smith, boom. We
Right.
just made up for 3 drives where we couldn't do anything, but boom. Indiana's not going to do that in this game, I do not believe. So I do think that Notre Dame is a 10 to 14 point better team, something in that range, if not more.
Really? You think the gap is that much? Okay. Yeah, I mean, with the game being in South Bend, I could see that. I just think if Indiana can limit Notre Dame's running game and Rourke can make enough plays, I think Indiana can keep this close. I kind of tend to agree with you. I just think Notre Dame is the better overall football team. When I look at them top to bottom, I think they're better defensively. I think they've got more balance offensively. My only question is, if their running game is limited, can they get enough out of their passing game?
And see, this is where I run into issues, is where I don't think Notre Dame's just a significantly better team. I do think that Notre Dame is one of the 5 to 10 best teams in college football. And I think that Indiana is more like 25th. I don't think that
Okay.
they're that good. I think they're a good football team. But again, those 2 Notre Dame running backs, they're as good as they come. And
Yeah.
even though Indiana is
No.
good defensively against the run, combine Notre Dame's offensive line, which is not a vintage, but it's really good. And those 2 backs, I think Notre Dame is going to have more success running the football by far than Indiana is going to. And
Okay.
that will allow Riley Leonard to do what he does, which Notre Dame certainly doesn't want him throwing the ball 40 or 45 times either. But if they keep him in that 22 to 25 pass attempt range and get him out on the perimeter with some RPOs, I think Notre Dame just has more options offensively to separate. I don't think that they're going to kill Indiana, but I am talking myself into a substantial win.
Yeah, I think this is a game where they definitely could pull away in the second half, maybe in the third quarter, if they run the ball. I mean, if they're upwards of 150 or more yards rushing, right around 5 yards a carry or more in this game, then I think I'm with you. I think they win the game by at least 14 points or more. So, yeah, I could see that happening if they're able to run the football. And I agree. I think the defensive line for Notre Dame, which is really underrated, can get after work. I think Indiana, when they faced a better defensive front, you pointed out, they're going to be in trouble. I did want to get to Penn State and SMU. This is by far, Ohio State, Tennessee, Penn State, SMU are 1A, 1B as far as, to me, the most interesting games. I actually think SMU has a legitimate chance in this game because I think SMU can move the football. I think this Penn State defense, and I said early in the year, I thought this Penn State defense would be good, but I didn't think defensively they would be as good as they were a year ago. And I've been totally proven right once they faced any type of decent offense this year, especially an offense that can throw the ball and be a little bit multiple, have a little bit of a running game to kind of mix in there. I think SMU can move the ball, but I still like Penn State at home just because I'm confident in Penn State's running game. And I think Aller's a better quarterback this year than he was a year ago. I think he's grown. I just think that Penn State can run the football, and I think they're going to be more balanced than SMU.
You're backing my guy, Drew Aller.
I am. I'm riding the Drew Aller. I'm becoming partial to Ohio quarterbacks that come to Penn State. Mark's got a lot of love for Blackledge and Sean Clifford. He was president of the Sean Clifford fan club. So now I'm becoming like that with Drew Aller, so to speak. Who's, by the way, got
Drew Aller.
I've defended Aller because he's got nothing at wide receiver. All he's got is a tight end, although he may have the best tight end in college football in Warren. But I like the way he's shown some growth this year, and I believe they're going to run the ball really well against SMU's defense.
Who was out there in the chat watching Drew Aller against Oregon? I thought he played a heck of a game. He
did. I even think the second interception might have been more on the receiver than it was on him, actually, if you go back and watch that. The first one was a lousy throw, but the second interception down the sideline, I think, was more on the receiver than it was on him.
Do you remember the ball that he threw when they had to have it on a fourth down? They were around the 15-yard line, and the defensive lineman had him by the collar.
Yeah.
And he just whipped it with his wrist.
Yeah. He's got arm talent. He can move around. If he comes back next year, which I heard he will, he's going to have a big year. I'm interested to see if they do miss their Taysom Hill type player, Prabula, by the way, who hit the portal. By the way, that's their the way Sean Payton used Taysom Hill with the Saints is the way Colton Nickey uses uses Prabula for Penn State. By the way.
Oh yeah, here's my theory there, though.
Go ahead.
They got away from just using Prabula just as a third and fourth and short guy. He started to come in and they would bring him in. Aller's like hit and throw after throw after throw after throw. And then all of a sudden they bring in Prabula on the edge of the red zone on first down. And then if that play doesn't work, then Aller's coming in and it's 2nd and 10 or 2nd and 12. What's good about this situation is, yes, they have less options. They don't have their backup quarterback. Now, obviously, if Aller goes down, then throw out everything that I'm saying here because they've got to go to their third string quarterback. But
right,
it takes the decision-making of this constant, like trying to figure out where do we bring in Prabula to be the runner and bring in packages for him. Just let Aller be the starting quarterback. Let him run the game start to finish. I think it's actually a positive.
By the way, Mark, do you peg this game as a high-scoring game? I mean, does this look like a 31-28, maybe 35-31 game? Because I think SMU can move the ball.
I may have not thought that so much before the Big Ten championship game, but Penn State's defense looked pretty ordinary against Oregon. Wow,
Well,
they got dragged all over the field.
To be fair, I think Oregon might have the most complete offense in the country when you look at it top to bottom.
I do agree with that. I generally agree with that. I'm trying to think if I would take any other offense above Oregon. I guess I wouldn't. I would generally agree with that statement. However, Oregon hasn't played that way against everybody. They didn't look that good against Ohio State. They certainly didn't look that good against Wisconsin.
Well, I mean, they still scored north of 30 against us. I mean, they were the only team to do that. So,
They just seemed like they moved the ball at will in that game against Penn State.
That's true. They did. I mean, I think SMU can score, though. I think SMU keeps this game close because of their offense, but I just think Penn State at home with balance wins this game. Is that your gut feeling? And do you think it's close, though?
Well, I know coming off of that ACC championship game, I thought the better team did not win the game. I thought SMU looked like the better team, that Clemson was holding on for dear life, and they made those couple plays right at the end to put their field goal kicker obviously in position. I think that if Katron Allen in particular, both backs, but Allen, he looked super impressive against Oregon. He refused to go down. He was running like a man possessed. I think Penn State's clearly a better team. And as long as this game is not played in some kind of wild fashion, meaning turnovers or special teams plays that go in SMU's favor, but I'm not going to discount SMU's defense. They didn't play a tremendous schedule, but their defensive rankings are solid, and their defense is pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, they showed fight in that comeback against Clemson. Correct me if I'm wrong. Clemson was up 31-14 in that game, and SMU made the comeback at the end. So obviously, Clemson had to kick a nearly 60-yard field goal to win it. So yeah, I just like Penn State at home. I know everybody thinks James Franklin here, but I just like the way their quarterback's playing. I like the new offensive coordinator at Penn State, and I like their balance. So that's why I'm with SMU. The only thing that I think they can keep SMU close in this game is if they can move the football, which I think they can move the football a little bit, but I think Penn State will probably pull away in the fourth quarter.
Well, Penn State doesn't blow out quality football teams, so I do not expect them to blow out SMU. Does that mean that they can't win by double digits or 2 scores? Of course they can, because they could be a close 1-score game and they could tack on a late touchdown or field goal. But I do not expect Penn State to run away from SMU whatsoever.
No. Yeah, I see it in that 31-24, 34-24 kind of game, Mark.
I'm with you.
It's kind of my vibe. Before I get to Ohio State, Tennessee, I will say, I don't think Clemson has. I wanted to say Clemson has a chance, but I'm with you, Mark. I've not been impressed with Clemson this entire year. Klubnik, I know Maffa is a solid running back, but do you see them doing anything against Texas's defense?
No, I don't, and that's the big problem. Is that I think Klubnik's a good quarterback, and I think he's much improved.
Right.
A good quarterback. But Phil Maffa, in his last 4 games, is averaging just over 2 yards per carry. They had, and that's in 55 rush attempts. They started having offensive line issues, and their offensive line was nothing to write home about to begin with, but started having offensive line issues mid-season. They lost 2 players in one game against Pitt. Now, one of them came back, but Clemson, their wide receiver core is better than it's been the last couple of years, but it's still nothing scary. I don't see them scoring points in this game.
I don't either. The only thing that keeps this game close is if that Texas offense, which is totally underachieved this year in everybody's viewpoint and has in a lot of ways gotten worse over the course of the season, as long as yours doesn't really get careless with the football, I think Texas will be okay because I think their defense can do enough in this game. I do think Texas's offensive line is pretty solid, but I just don't see enough from this football team consistently offensively throwing the football or running the football. If yours is off and Texas offense is just not clicking as it's been in a lot of games and not just against Georgia, it's not clicked in a lot of other games as well this year. That's the only way I see this game being close. I don't know if that's your feeling, Mark. Maybe turnovers and the Texas offense just being bad.
Yeah, it's been underwhelming. They didn't score points in either Georgia game. They only scored 17 against Texas A&M.
All right.
When you look at their point totals, they're not impressive at all. Even though their receivers impress me, their receivers are really good. They did drop a lot of passes in the SEC championship game. And this Trey Weisner, the running back, I think he's good. They did lose probably the highest rated offensive lineman in next year's NFL draft, Kelvin Banks at left tackle. I don't think he's playing. He's done. But if they can just protect the ball and move the ball, and this Clemson defense is nothing special.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to say, Mark, is that watching the end of the SEC title game, I mean, for me, it was yours who just looked off. I mean, there were some throws there towards the end of that game where they had a shot to pull that game out at the end. And in the second half, and that was a game where I think they may have lost in the first half anyway. What did they have, 240 some yards in the first half and only 6 points to show for it in that game? So, yeah, to me, it would be just Texas downplaying in this game that would only keep it close. Just bottom line.
They had like a 250 to 60 yards advantage at halftime against Georgia, and what led by a field goal.
Right.
They had that game in their hands to run away with it and just let them off the hook.
Right. But I think they're going to be fine in this one. All right, let's get to it, Mark. Ohio State and Tennessee, the game everybody's talking about. Can't get here fast enough for us Ohio State fans. I will say this. I'm growing a little bit more confident as the weeks moved along. I've seen Tennessee play 4 times this year, and I know that I asked you earlier in the year how good you thought they were and whether this is a team that could legitimately contend for a national championship. I will say I thought that the Georgia game, the last game I saw them play, was kind of the proving ground game for me. And the one thing that I took from that game is Carson Beck, who was playing awful football before that game, arguably had his best game. Well, I don't think it's arguable, Mark. He had his best game of the year in that game against Tennessee. And he looked like complete garbage before that football game. And the closer I look at Tennessee, and this has been thrown out as a comp, Mark, how comparable are they to Penn State, or are they kind of like a poor man's Penn State? Because I think there are some similarities when it comes to personnel. What do you think of that comparison?
Tennessee and Penn State. I'll take Penn State's quarterback right now for sure. And I'll take their tight end for sure.
Okay.
And I'll take Tennessee's wide receivers for sure. I will take the combination of Penn State's running backs, although Dylan Sampson's basically as good as either of the Penn State backs, but Penn State has 2 of them. And really, the second Tennessee back really doesn't take much off of Dylan Sampson's plate. He's not that much of a factor. Defensively, I think that Tennessee's vulnerable in the secondary more so than Penn State. I think Penn State's got a better secondary, but otherwise they're pretty comparable, and they both have a top 5 to 10 pick coming off the edge.
So obviously you can see some similarities here.
Oh yeah.
Yep. Yeah. That's why I think that, I've seen a few other people make that comparison. I think that this to me, as much as it comes down to the offensive line, and I can't believe Ohio State is struggling to find somebody that can play guard, by the way. I mean, if this game comes down to us being weak at guard, I mean, please. We've got 3 guys out there, and not one of them can at least be a serviceable guard. I mean, give me a break. I also think, the other 2 big things, obviously the offensive line, but I think Will Howard, as I talked about after the game, he, early in the season, Mark, I was seeing he had those 1 or 2 throws that he would make a game that, why did you make that throw? And he got away from that post Penn State. Now the schedule weakened up a little bit there, but I thought he played a really solid game against Indiana, actually. And then obviously it reared its ugly head the last game. And I'm a firm believer, if he plays a clean game, Ohio State can win this game by 10 points. Now that's a big if, because he's shown an ability this year to make that type of throw, maybe 1 or even 2 throws a game. But I also think Ohio State can do some things offensively through scheme to kind of help with pass protection. They can max protect. They can slide protection to help out their tackles with their edge rushers. They can go tempo. They can do some RPOs. There are things they can do to kind of mitigate the Tennessee pass rush in this game and get the ball to their skill players. So for me, it's A, that offensive game plan, and B, Will Howard's ability to take care of the football and get rid of the ball quickly, that are right up there with the offensive line play. And I get why people are talking about the offensive line play. Just your thoughts on that.
So if I was going to go down a priority list of Ohio State objectives in this game, number 1 is the offensive line. And you're right, a good play caller and a good strategist, and Ohio State is supposed to have 2 of them, should be able to, you can't erase a bad offensive line. And certainly you would rather have a great offensive line than you just call whatever you want. But they're going to have to feel that out. So they're going to have a couple lines of thinking here. They're going to have to say, if we get into this game and we're having obvious issues, then we have to go a different direction. But as it stands, we're going to show some confidence, and we want to pump the ball downfield, and we want to be able to do what we want to do. So that's where you have to have feel for the game and feel for your own personnel and feel for the situation, which they had 0 feel for anything against Michigan, of course.
Right.
So that's number 1, is the offensive line tied to the play calling and direction of this, just not the play calling from play to play, but setting things up.
Right.
And then I would go to Will Howard, and like you, and I try to forgive some of these mistakes. They're college quarterbacks. They're going to make some missed throws, but there's a difference between missing a guy on 3rd and 9 that's going to get you first down at midfield versus throwing 7 points away twice against the 2 best, outside of Oregon, the 2 best opponents on the schedule. So that's what I think you're talking about in regards to playing a clean game. You can't play a perfect game.
Right.
Playing the clean game.
Right, exactly. Just don't give the ball to them.
Yeah.
Right.
Maybe you do that once, but it's not in your own end zone.
Right. Right.
Or, Will Howard obviously did it once in his own end zone and once going into their end zone against the team up north. So, yeah, he would be next on the scale. I will bring the defense into it because I don't want to write them off as a given, like they can do no wrong. I would say that mobile quarterbacks, and Nico's at the high end of that, give everyone issues. I hear fans and media talk about, well, mobile fast quarterbacks give that defense some trouble and that defense some trouble. Well, they give just about all of them trouble at some point. Khalil Mullings did have 100+ yards.
He did.
And Jordan James did have 100+ yards in the Oregon game. Now, Ohio State was effective against the two Penn State backs, but Dylan Sampson is an impressive runner.
He is. He's really good. You know, I think what they're going to try to do is, it would be interesting to see whether defensively they try to creep their safeties up, if they try to bring downs and ransom to closer to the line of scrimmage to help stop the run. Then that leaves, are you confident in these corners that gave up the big plays against Oregon to hang in there against the passing game? I think Nico's got a strong arm, and I think he in this game, what I would watch for is him making those big passing plays on like broken plays, Mark, where he gets outside the pocket, they lose contain downfield, and maybe he hits a down the field shot. And I think that's my concern too, in as much as Dylan Sampson is a concern, is maybe some down the field shots with him using his legs on a broken play. That combined with Sampson running the football are my two biggest concerns about Tennessee's offense, obviously. I actually think that they can win this game even if Sampson has a really good game running the football. Remember, Sampson had a huge game against Georgia, and they only scored 17 points. So I think this is one of those games where it's the first team to maybe 20 wins this game. Ohio State, other than maybe the Oregon game this year, where they've played a top-level opponent, Ohio State, I think offensively against a really good defense is still, barring them getting turnovers or special teams, because remember the Indiana game, Mark, they got 2 special teams touchdowns. So that kind of added to that score, and then Henderson busted that run at the end of the game in that game. So I think from an offensive standpoint, I think against a really good defense, the max I can see this team scoring is somewhere in the low 20s. My feel, and I've grown a little bit more confident as the weeks have gone along here, is somewhere in the 21 to 20, 24 to 20 type game. But I'm lean to Ohio State somewhere in that neighborhood.
Well, I think that makes total sense versus what Vegas is projecting, which would be, let's see, 46, 47 points. So they're looking at 27-20 Ohio State. That's a little higher. And I don't think we can discount, not that Vegas is never wrong, because they are frequently, but when they're usually wrong, most of us are wrong. Most of us didn't see it coming. And they obviously think that Ohio State is as significantly better than Tennessee as Penn State is and as Notre Dame is in their games.
Yeah, and Ohio State, I believe, is getting, second or third best odds to win the national championship out of the 12 teams involved in the playoff right now, Mark, according to Vegas. So, yeah, I mean, I think that Sampson could run the ball. He could have a solid day. I think it's them giving up, some big plays in the passing game that would really hurt them. That or turnovers would, I think, be their real death nail in this game. I think he could. I think Sampson could run for a little over 100 yards in this game, and they could still be okay. Is my overall view. So I think Howard maybe has one mistake. He cannot afford to have 2. If he has 0, I think Ohio State can win this game by at least 10 points. I think he'll have 1, so that's why I'm going 24-20.
Okay. Well, it runs in line with what Vegas is looking at, and I don't know that anyone would be surprised with that result. Tennessee's a really good football team. Are they a great team? By no means.
All right, my friend. Well, hey, we going to get back together and talk college football on Thursday or Friday, or when are you going to rerun this again?
We're going to go before the Notre Dame Indiana game.
Okay.
After Notre Dame Indiana.
All right. Well, I'll be sure to check in after Notre Dame and Indiana, my friend.
That sounds good.
All right,
Good
you have
to
a good
see you,
one,
David.
Mark. Take care now.
You
Bye-bye.
too. We will keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. We've got our buddy Michael Hogue on the line. Michael, how you doing?
Good, Mark. How you doing tonight, sir?
I am doing well. What's up?
Not much. I wanted to get your take last week about Purdue's hire, but that's for a different show since this is all about the playoffs and the transfer portal. But what was your take about? If I'm not mistaken, didn't Dabo Swinney said he'll never take a player in the transfer portal?
I don't believe he ever said that. No.
Oh, I was just, I mean, no, because I thought he didn't want nobody from the portal. Because I know that a Purdue player went to is transferred to Clemson for next year.
So here's the deal. Yes, Clemson has gone out and gotten at least 3 or 4 out of the transfer portal. I know that I did a record on Clemson earlier this week, and they already had 2, and they had their eyes on 2 more. And I did see, let's see, the guy you're talking about is
Will Height.
Yeah, I just had it pulled up here a second ago. Yeah, there he is.
Yep, Will Height.
Okay. Edge rusher.
Yep.
Was he doing anything at Purdue?
He did some. I mean, he had like 37 I think 37 tackling, like 5 sacks this year.
Okay.
And stuff like that. But I also wanted to get your take also while we're talking about transfers. Also about Dylan Thieneman going to Oregon.
Who?
Dylan Thieneman. He was at Purdue also.
Oh, yeah. Well, I know that, he's one of the best safeties in the Big Ten. And certainly didn't want to hang around Purdue and continue to lose football games. And Oregon's got about as much money to spend as anyone.
Yep, and then I seen Purdue picked up a transfer portal today from Malik Singleton from Arkansas.
Oh, yeah, I know who that is. You're talking about the quarterback.
Yeah. So, no, I just want to get it like that.
Yeah, he battled for their starting job. He was in the mix.
All right. No, I didn't know much about him. I didn't know if he did. Anyway, do you think it's going to be a blowout tomorrow night in South Bend?
A blowout, no. I think that Notre Dame is going to separate itself in the fourth quarter.
Okay. What does Indiana have to do to have a puncher's chance?
Well, I think they've got a better than puncher's chance. I think that their offensive line has to hold up in pass protection. I think that that's where they had their biggest issue against Ohio State and Michigan was pass protection.
Mm-hmm.
So that's number one. Obviously, they have to play close to mistake-free football, and they have to stop Notre Dame's run game. And I would even advise them to cheat a little bit to stop the run game, because I don't think that Notre Dame's pass game is that super effective, and that Indiana probably can't stop Notre Dame's run game straight up. So they're going to have to cheat a little bit.
Mm-hmm. That's one thing I was trying to figure out too, because I wasn't sure. And I guess I was thinking if they could somehow stop Leonard and stuff like that, make him throw the ball, they would probably have a real good shot and stuff like that to force some of the turnovers and stuff. Tongue got twisted up. Sorry about that. I think they would have a good chance if they can force some turnovers early and stuff like that. Because Riley, I mean, he has been prone to fumble this year, hasn't he? In games you might have seen.
He's only thrown 5 picks. I don't know if he's fumbled the ball much at all. I can't really answer that. I don't remember.
Mm-hmm.
Don't recall him fumbling a lot.
All right. Now, which game are you looking forward to Saturday?
Which game?
Yeah.
Well, the 2 best teams on one field are going to be in Columbus, Ohio.
Mm-hmm. So do you think that SMU has a shot?
Oh, sure they do.
But what will they have to do, in your opinion, to get it done?
Well, they need to start the game faster than they did against Clemson. They got in a hole against Clemson. They got down 14-0. They trailed 31-14 going into the fourth quarter, and then I thought SMU completely outplayed Clemson, not just in the fourth quarter, in the second half. They were a better team. TJ Parker, Clemson's best defensive end, caused a strip sack that led to a touchdown early in that game, and SMU is going to see a better version of him in Abdul Carter. So they've got to be aware of where he's at and double team him, chip him, do whatever they can to keep him off of Kevin Jennings, their starting quarterback. But I really think that SMU is a good shot in this game.
Now, as far as Texas and Clemson, do you think it'll be 60-40 Ewers? 60-40 Manning Saturday?
Oh, Manning playing more?
Yeah.
I don't think anything gives us indication that's going to be the case.
I was just wondering, or is it going to be on how the game goes and stuff like that? I'm just going back from what we see from the SEC championship.
What we saw in the SEC championship was about 95-5 Ewers. But
I was wondering,
a lot of Texas fans are disgruntled with Quinn Ewers because they really haven't scored many points. They only scored 19 in the SEC championship game and 15 the other time they played Georgia, and they've had a lot of low-scoring output.
Yeah, I just wondered stuff like that. What it could be like Saturday night. Do you think it's almost like a pro-Tennessee crowd there Saturday night?
Well, we're hearing rumors that Tennessee is gobbling up tickets. I don't know if that's true or not. I was talking to somebody earlier. They called and asked the same question. And I do think that Ohio State fans are probably more, I don't want to say apathetic. That's not the right term because they're not apathetic for sure. But because of the expectation of winning playoff games, they're not, I don't know that they're terribly excited about this game.
And that's true and stuff like that too. All right. I don't know if you have any more callers. Maybe you do stuff like that. But I did reply back to your direct message earlier on Twitter.
Okay, Michael.
All right. And you going live or are you just doing some pre-recorded stuff before the game tomorrow?
I thought we would hop on here before the game and get some last final takes in and then go live after the game as well.
Sounds good. Any chance you can be live streaming during the playoffs?
During the playoffs? No. We will leave you alone to watch the games, Michael. You just enjoy yourself, watch the games, and then we'll see you after the games.
Yeah, not bad. But it was fun doing that, though. But all right, Mark. Thank you. I will see you in about 20 hours, man. See ya.
Thanks, Michael.
Yeah.
It's our buddy Michael Hogue jumping on to talk some Purdue football. Barry Odom coming in from UNLV. We'll see what he is able to do. Did a fine job there with the running Rebs. And Purdue can win. With the right coach, Purdue can win. Obviously, Ryan Walters was in over his head. Yes, our thoughts are that we're going to go live right before Notre Dame and Indiana. Then we'll circle back and, of course, do the post-game and take your calls after the first playoff game. It's history in the making, folks. First 12-team college football playoff. These are the kind of matchups we wanted to see. We didn't necessarily anticipate SMU or Indiana being in the playoff, but Ohio State, Tennessee, Clemson, Texas is kind of what we signed up for here. All right, folks. I am curious also on Saturday to see how TNT tackles college football. I've not looked into it to see who they have hired to announce these games, if they're going with their regular game announcers for the other sports, or if they have hired out for other announced teams, because I'm a nerd when it comes to TV. I worked in the TV industry my whole life for 30 plus years. So that portion of all of this interests me. because I think it has many times turned out to be a bit odd, a bit underwhelming when a new sport has been introduced on a network, especially during postseason when they have not had the entire season or the entire off season to build up to it. But sometimes it's a bit awkward and not well produced, and they know how to do TV and they know how to do other sports, but they don't necessarily know the best way to do that particular sport. So TNT college football should be interesting. We got Jackson Johnson in the chat. He could probably tell us the last time TNT did a college football game. I know they did in the 80s for sure. I know they did in the 90s. I can remember seeing all sorts of Georgia Tech, NC State games on TNT in the 90s, but I think they probably gave that up sometime in the mid 1990s. Let's look through the transfer portal. There are some highlights here I wanted to hit on. And as always, we'll take your comments and questions. Washington State star offensive tackle Fa Alili Fa Omo, top-ranked available offensive tackle, is visiting Michigan. He's already had an LSU visit. Okay. Coastal Carolina running back Christian Washington ran for 537 yards last year. He's going to San Diego State. All right. Who else? I have not looked at this all day, which is unusual for me. Bo Prabula is going to visit Ole Miss. How about that? I know that he's also visiting, yeah, they've got it right there. Missouri, Iowa, UCF. Huh. Okay. Anthony Calandria, the other quarterback in play, the one from Virginia, has visited Ole Miss recently. Malachi Singleton, as Michael mentioned, picked up a commitment to Purdue. We've got an Alabama offensive tackle, Miles McVay, going to North Carolina, and Bill Belichick, top 200 player in the 2023 class. I know nothing about UAB center Brady Wilson, but he's gone to Virginia. Isaiah Hunter from Cal to Nebraska at wide receiver. Ole Miss cornerback Jaden Kennedy set to enter the transfer portal. And of course, he was a transfer before that at Tulane. Rajon Davis, former USC linebacker. He's visiting Fresno State and Oregon State. How the mighty have fallen. Rajon Davis, Bama, USC, now looking at the likes of Oregon State and San Diego State. Ex-Maryland standout running back Roman Hemby visiting Indiana on Saturday. The Indiana football team and Kurt Signetti and staff is going to be in South Bend, Indiana on Saturday. No. Obviously, they play on Friday. Okay, they're going to be back on Saturday. And former Terp running back Roman Hemby, who played for a long time at Maryland. There you see his stats, 3 years at Maryland, visiting IU. Marshall linebacker Jaden Yates is expected to transfer to Ole Miss. Had 115 tackles. That's a ton. This is a nice pickup. Quentin Joyner, really good running back, a lot of potential. He's expected to transfer to Texas Tech. 247 Sports, fifth best running back in the portal. And we will shut it down from there. Do appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Disputed National Champions is the book. We would recommend that you would check it out. The link is in the description section of this video and to all the videos. Again, Disputed National Champions. It's only $9.99. And you could probably rush order it and get it in time for Christmas. Get it for your favorite college football fan. Disputed National Champions. It was a joy to write. I hope it's a joy to read. We're getting a lot of great feedback on it. So thank you for your tremendous reviews. Thank you for that. Disputed National Champions. I think you'll enjoy it. All right, folks. Appreciate you being here. We'll catch you before Notre Dame and Indiana kickoff, about a half hour to an hour before the game. And then, of course, take your calls after ND and IU right here at the Voice of College Football. You guys have a great night.